Nous voilà de retour, c'est reparti.
We are back for this last afternoon together, and we're going to start with a discussion about video games and transmedia. Parallel to that, we have a workshop staged by Brainsonic dedicated to the possible perspectives and stakes in the AV sector.
Then to be so Brainsonic are the experts here. So I welcome first of all on the stage for this discussion, panel discussion. Then could you come up, gentlemen, please? And we will welcome from Brainsonic. This is video games and transmedia, mutual influence. Then this panel discussion, which is about to begin, will bring together experts on video games. Video games, we believe, has a lot of then creative, interactive, fields of expertise, and we have those experts with us here to explain to us what is their vision. If you have any questions or points from the floor, feel free. Quickly, Julien Aubert, who's coming up, who is founder of Big Fixture, Maureen Boucher, who Transmedia Social Media Vice President of the Content Division of Orange, Rick Gibson, who is Game Investors Director, and Laurent Guerin, finally. Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the audience. Now, thanks for attending this panel discussion. Now, when I heard the topic for this discussion, it seemed to me so obvious that the video games and transmedia interact and cross-influence one another. It seems so almost stating the obvious there. So I wondered then whether, or rather, what are the fundamentals of video games? I'm not an addict necessarily, although I do play video games off and on, but I just wondered, and I'd like to share and ask our panelists here on stage, when we talk about cross-influences, then do we all have the same aims and objectives? Do we want to just tell a fine line, a fine story, then secure a captive audience, and develop that interaction, which are part of then video games and have been around for the last 50 years. So maybe, Julien, maybe you could start to tell us what are the fundamentals of video games as you see them. The fundamentals are basically the user. The user is center stage here. When you say video game, you immediately think of or think what is the ability of the user to play the game, use the game, make something of that game, then control it. Then on a games console and on a joystick that he can move from right to left, and so on. So. That's the first question. Then what can the avatar do too? Secondly, then with the different figures in the game. So transmedia, then with games designers together, then we want to tell a story, a fine story, and the games designers tell us, well, what can the players do, and how can the players' role be leveraged? Because when we talk about interactivity and interfacing, it's something that we need to address, and that's the parallel with transmedia. People have started talking about transmedia when the internet then was launched, and people wondered how it could best be used in video games. We don't talk much actually about fiction, about non-linear fiction, because there is no linear fiction in video games. Video games are about interaction, different pathways that you cross and go down then in the story as the storyline unfolds. So that is the fundamental for me. It's an experience that we're offering the user basically. To take that a stage further, and I'm going to hand over to Rick now. Rick, who runs a company, co-runs a company that does a lot of consulting and on commercial strategy. And its clients are investors as well as media owners. Rick, turning to you, in all the businesses and companies that you advise, what's important? What is a good game? What is a good game? A story world, an entertainment product offering. What is a good video game for you, Rick?
Well, we're not production staff, we're purely commercial, and we advise on the strategy of gaming to a wide range of broadcasters, media owners, TV companies, technology companies. And what we always ask at the start is, who is the game for? Who are they? Where do they play? What platform do they play on? What genres of games are popular for that particular audience on that particular platform? How much will they pay, and how will they pay for the product? Is it a freemium product? Is it a premium product? Is it subscription? There are many business models. And then I suppose importantly for the latest generation of games companies over the last couple of years has been, how will the game change based on the games company's understanding of user behavior? So what I mean by that is that games companies these days on social games, on mobile games, many online games, massively multiplayer online games, will launch the smallest possible product they can. They will look at how the users are interacting with their product, and then they will change it so that it becomes more successful. A constant process of optimization that makes the game more fun. It makes the game recruit better from a particular user base. It makes the game make more money. So we always come back to the user. I suspect we're answering the same question in a slightly, giving the same answer in a slightly different way. The user is absolutely at the center of our strategizing for our clients.
Okay.
I've concluded and found that the commonality between video games and transmedia programs, for want of a better term, is intrigue, a plot, a story, a storyline, action. Then when you talk about joysticks that you can move one way or the other, that's an example of that. And also characters and engagement and rewards. We have the same parameters in video games as well as in transmedia. Would you agree with that? The basic then ingredient here is the gameplay. The gameplay, that's the difference. That strikes the difference between the control that the player has over the game and the power that we can entrust to the avatar. That's gameplay. It's your latitude or leeway that the player has. Then you've got the gameplays or the cluster, or then it's called the cluster, which is a challenge. It's an aim, it's an objective that you're going to try and meet. You're going to engage the user, ask him or her questions, then quiz him or her, and then the next aim is to how that player is going to solve the problem. So gameplay, it's a playful experience. Then a game. Then it could be, I don't know, kill your boss. Duff over your boss, for example, or it could be then there's a very strong narrative tension there that is inherent in the game, and in the drugs such as Angry Birds, it's to break structures, the system. It's fun per se, and finally the gameplay will end with a reward, the issuing of a reward or rewards at the end of the video game, where each action or step in the action as it unfolds has a feedback. It could be in a type of combat game or FPS, for example. It would be then recharging your firearm, for example. So that is a reward which is regarded as satisfactory. It's playful, and it's playful, entertaining. People then, when they're reloading down, find that fun. They keep reloading down, downloading. So the question is, how will you reward, and in what form will you reward the player for that activity? What's key here, and we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, later on. Then I don't want to put the cat before, the horse, or the cart before the horse. The reward to the player will be an output. Then will depend on how successful I've been in my combat, in defeating the boss or murdering the boss and so on. So it's about injecting meaning in that type of action. I don't want to go back to the basics of video games again. You talked earlier about sound design or designing the sound or the soundtrack, but I think we don't talk about that enough. An example then that comes to mind here is Angry Birds, that mass audience product. The sound, the noises then are very much an example of this. Morgan, you do a lot of transmedia business and video game business. The topic before us this afternoon, gentlemen, it's the influence between transmedia and video games, which I'm sure you experience every day. So then should transmedia, then people, operators also produce video games, and they have for years, but are they doing exactly the same thing? That is telling a story and interacting with the story. It's more than that, actually. It's an encounter, a natural encounter that naturally unfolds, a cross-fertilization between fiction, then the screen, a conventional screen, TV screen, and people from the games world. Who then socialize, who have a strong sense of rewards or a system of rewards, who then have left the larger screen to do more multitasking. So that's an encounter. That's what I mean by that. In addition, above and beyond then that and the figures, it's about then observing the rules. The rules in a fiction story as it unfolds, and to draw on it. Then in the game, based on one's perception, vision of the world, it could be then we are far ahead of the fiction industry now. This is a new business line today. So that's the encounter. It's about working together. It's about teamwork then to move forward. Then you haven't got the author then at the top of the tree and the producer at the bottom of the pecking order or chain of command. It's far more subtle than that. It's about collaborative working, team working. The games designer works opposite the designer. Around the table, we have other operators, real-time operators, storytellers. So that's that's what I mean by teamwork. That's the encounter. That's the convergence between these different business lines. Finally, on producing video games in a production sense, transmedia sense, we are writing special Kates, specifications. Julien, can you give us some examples of the two key lists of specifications there, requirements, then documents? When you produce a video game, what would the specifiers stipulate? The first document you would need as we heard, is a game design concept document. It's a 10-page document, which it's a PowerPoint presentation, which starts with a platform, the game time, duration, the audience, the target audience, and that document, that games design document, will summarize the experience of the game. Then that is the roles, the constraints, the requirements, as Ben mentioned. Then it's there are requirements and how you can meet and fulfill those requirements and turn them into a fun experience for the user. Then it's about that key experience. That key experience is basically what will that user remember. Then the recall factor, then we all, when we were younger, built, developed, designed. Kids, were after playing a game, the kid, would get very frustrated and would probably want to destroy the game. So, and it's destroying, his mates' games as well, his friends' games. So, in a fit of fury. So Angry Birds is about that experience. It's about that, experience we all had as young children. It's not 100% virtual. It's going to spur and reactivate those memories that we had as young children where we were quite destructive. And the second then document is the game's end document that is basically the must-dos that the developer will need to do for the game. So it could be quite a thick document. Yeah, that's a 100-page document. The must-dos could run up to 100 pages. Then just as Heavy Rain ran to 100 pages. It's a must-do, as Morgan said. It's everyone will be part of it. The games designers will be part of the process, will have their say, but in a video game then team, everyone will roll up their sleeves and be part of that. So games design then concept is a 10-page document that will summarize the key experience fundamentals, and the games design document, the other one, second document, will go into the technicalities, the technical details. Then you've all been involved in transmedia in a major way, so this gives you are these documents then enough? But let me end on the video games. We're going to ask Rick to comment in a moment, and then Morgan and Julien to comment in that order. What are your preferred favourite video games in terms of experience, storyboards, and why? Rick.
Old school. My favourite game is called Elite. It came out in 1984, which dates me. And it was the first 3D game with wireframes. And it was the first open world game where you would travel in space and trade, and it had no boundaries and no borders. It was really difficult, and I remember playing it for hours and hours and hours into the night.
On m'a posé la question il y a pas longtemps.
Ask me the question. It's a tricky one. Probably Gina Verchechen, The Flower and Journey and Flow, if you remember that. Then a great little game, a jewel of a game, an easy game, probably one of the greatest video games ever produced, personally. Then I enjoyed another game, then Heavy Rain, not the most easy game, I must admit, Heavy Rain, then but a game that gave me a lot of satisfaction, personal satisfaction. Then video games, which is very close to a cinema experience, where that automobile suddenly turned over, then somersaulted, and my head was upside down, so to speak, or my body and my head were upside down, or the wrong way up, or the wrong way down. So that was an experience that I would certainly like to convey and certainly reproduce and replicate. Personally, I don't come from the video games world. I was very much impacted by those games when I was very young. My memory is Pong on a low table, then with a multi-screen. But as the man in the street player, then very much impacted by this world, Lego Star Wars, playing it with my son. As a non-player, I was struck by the Star Wars world that breathes, then in a very basic way, then somewhat untapped design or design features. So that's my memory, a simple memory, but it does show how strong the brands are and the strong role that they can play on these initial screens. So to pick up this experience, your key experience then in Star Wars is the return to the world of childhood with Morgan. Yes, absolutely. I saw Morgan's eyes, as it were, brighten. I am very much a car, automotive, 4-speed type of video game fan. I wonder then whether, and this is going to move on, I'm moving on then we have different childhood experiences. But Morgan, you talked about Star Wars, and the strength and the potency of those games. But to move on to influence and story world, we talked a bit about this earlier this morning. When we talk about story world awards, we talk about intellectual property rights now, which is the issue. Intellectual property rights, of course, are key to video game makers. And Transmedia, Rick, can you comment perhaps on and give us some insights into intellectual property rights in the whole area of video games, Rick?
Well, there's a great deal of licensing that goes on between media owners and games companies. The results of that licensing of that IP generally not set the world alight commercially. The rights are very finely distributed. The word that we use is called to slicense, and slicensing means that you allow one company to use the rights for your IP on one platform, possibly even one sub-platform. So it may be that, I don't know, The Price is Right from Fremantle Media is distributed to one company for skill gaming, another company for a vanilla mobile game, another company for social games, another company on console games, and so on. So the rights are very closely limited and described, and you can only do with that brand what the contract says that you can do. I think that what we also see around IP is a great deal of protectiveness, defensiveness from the rights holder, the media owner, and too much interaction with the audience. There's a great deal of sensitivity around letting users play around with your brand, possibly damage it. User-generated content will always throw out some inappropriate material unless you're very careful and spend a lot of money on moderation. And so the media owner will typically look very carefully at the company that is licensing from them before agreeing to hand over their baby.
Je lisais un article qui parlait des plus... Enfin, je sais pas si c'était les plus beaux...
I was reading an article dealing with the main famous IP manufacturers. I hate that words, but... And they were saying, they were quoting Marvel Comics and Disney. Do you agree on that?
Marvel Comics and Disney for...
Are they the biggest provider of IP or great IPs that were used over the last decade?
I'm afraid I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, they'll certainly be one of the larger licensors, but if you look at the movie studios, they will sub-license into games companies in console. You can find a whole range of different companies. So one of the largest deals that Electronic Arts did was with Mattel, the toy manufacturer, who owned the rights to, well, sort of everything really, Scrabble and I forget if Risk is one of theirs, but Monopoly and so on. And they sold their rights to Electronic Arts for a huge amount. I forget the exact number off the top of my head, but tens of millions of dollars. So there are lots of licensors. The problem at the moment is that, and this is where it comes back to my initial comments, is that there are so many different platforms for games these days that it's actually quite difficult to successfully distribute and make money out of a traditional media IP unless you spend a lot of money on it. So we see lots of failed examples of exploiting IP from traditional media in games because the IP is not quite strong enough internationally, or it doesn't quite have the reach or doesn't reach a particular demographic that buys games on a particular platform. So if you are a games company like Electronic Arts, you're thinking about a game, it's not just a game. It is a console game. It could be a TV console game. It could be a handheld console game. It could be a massively multiplayer online game. It could be a social game. It could be a casual download game. It could be a casual flash game. It could be some form of softer gamification. It could be a mobile game. And even then, there are subcategories. And so if you stand back and look at the games company's commercial position, if they want to take a really big brand, they have to exploit it across multiple different platforms in order to benefit from the marketing around a traditional bit of IP. So if it's a film that's just about to come out, you've got to line up all of your games to launch at the same time as the marketing for that movie, so that you benefit from the halo effect, and you can then spend less on marketing your games because you can piggyback on the back of that. But the investment is not, you don't just make one game, because the game for the console player is different to that for the handheld and mobile and so on and so forth. So what that means is that the IP marketing, the IP licensing industry at the moment is going through quite a tough time, because the number of IPs that are actually being licensed by games companies has been falling, because the bets that they have to make are bigger because there are so many more platforms. So it's actually quite a tough market out there for IP.
So it's like a transmedia world for the video game players. I mean, for the manufacturers, they have to release the game on different platforms, different games.
Either that, or you specialize and focus very specifically on a particular platform. But the fit of that IP with its user base, with the game and their user base and the game's platform and distribution mechanisms, these all need to be lined up. And what we tend to see with IP coming from television and going into games is that most fail. Most do, either because the budget is simply not good enough, it's not big enough to create the right kind of quality of game, and that happens a lot. Or the time frames are wrong. So maybe the licensor goes out into the market and says, here's my movie IP and it's coming out in 18 months. Your discussions start 18 months down before release. The discussions end 12 months before release. The publisher that's bought the rights then starts to talk to developers. And by the time they talk to a developer, it's 9 months before release. And at that point, you start to wonder, well, most platforms, unless they're the really small ones, there's not enough time to build a quality game. And so the end result is you rush the game's development, and then when the game comes out, it doesn't review very well because it just hasn't got enough time to polish. So there are lots of problems that pop up. You don't have to publish across all of these different platforms, but you've got to make your choice of platform really carefully and strategically.
Ok, j'avais envie du coup de...
Yes, so I wanted to ask Morgan a question on intellectual property right and IPs. You developed several numerous projects at Orange, among them Detective Avenue, Fanfan 2, Prodigies, the Killing Children, and I think you also have a little surprise for us. Regarding those projects, Orange is the partner and co-producer, but they do not own the intellectual property right, do they? What was the intention behind this? Well, each case is a specific. Fanfan 2 was an investigation. We were really exploring the field together with Orange in order to see how appealing the Orange brand was, how appealing to the readers and to this community who's fond of Alexandre Jardin. So we were really conducting research on this field. Then Detective Avenue. Our intention was another one. We wanted to study the myth of fiction using a game. This is probably a topic on which we're going to expand very much today. And then the other project was made in collaboration. The Prodigies project was dedicated to accompanying a movie, so it was rather a marketing go-with approach. It was not an IP approach. It was a distinct situation. We were just new on this field. Our approach is the one from the technological and network perspective, and we think that we may add some new values to this ecosystem and bring them to the creative industry. For that, we need tools that do not exist today, not yet. So this is our perspective. Great Minds, we'll probably see the trailer later on. It's 4 minutes long. We want to carry out a collaborative work. It is not necessarily IP per se. We are rather testing, looking for communication. I try to make this kind of project in order to innovate and to take risks, to open and pave new ways. So this is our approach in this respect. Morgan, you're very modest, but I would like to give you the opportunity to benefit from an exclusive showcase, which is the AdMinds trailer you can watch right now. Maybe you want to introduce this trailer to us, both? Well, 1.5 years ago, we had this game development company that came to a telco, which was an interesting encounter. The game company is Lexis Numérique with José Sanchi and Mr. Liviano, and they offered us a totally new project, a never-seen, unprecedented project. It was a story broadcast on networks that is approaching any possible screens, including our daily screen, our daily life. So we were very surprised as we were seeing such a high-level story being offered to us. And there was one flip side, which were the numerous technological issues. So they came to us in order to find solutions in terms of technique. We've been working quite a long time on this, and we had several trades and businesses coming together in order to write on this. We had game designers, developers, and writers, but also engineers from Telco, Orange Lab from Paris and San Francisco, who came in order to add value, bring technical solutions and practical solutions in order to deliver the written experience. What is the pitch of it? I made the promise that I would not deliver a pitch on it. I do not want to deliver too many clues on this. I don't want to unveil the content of this game. So let's first have a look at the trailer, which has been validated.
When I first got started on this adventure, there's no way I could have known I was getting into something so big. When I first got started on this adventure, there's no way I could have known I was getting into something so big. I never thought I'd be inviting all the characters into my life, and that there would be so many secrets.
It's as if you speak some sort of unknown language.
The silence slowly becomes true.
I had no idea that the dividing line between the real and virtual worlds would become so blurred.
Catherine! 8 months. We've been on this thing for 8 months.
When I got started, I thought it was only a game. Hello?
Five young scientists from Belgrade University, working on a project funded by the Atkinson Foundation, mysteriously go missing in the Ukraine in September 2011. 6 months later, amateur video footage revives the investigation with evidence to support the theory of a kidnapping. Frustrated with the local authorities dragging their heels, the Foundation decides to pick up the investigation from scratch.
The place where they were reported missing and the place where they were last seen alive.
And in order to do this, we've set up 2 teams of investigators.
The Foundation hires 2 groups of investigators, each responsible for exploring all the leads that the authorities have failed to follow up.
which is what Fabio is having a look at right now. So this is great news, and hopefully it's going to lead to something.
In a bid to give the groups a helping hand with their investigations, the Foundation appeals to internet users around the world for their support.
Users could have on this kind of research.
That includes you. So here you are, up to your neck in a real-time paranormal thriller where your actions could determine the course of events. To help you keep tabs on the investigation and make your own contributions, the Foundation has provided a rich toolkit which you can use to stay in daily contact with the investigators and all the other internet sleuths. You can analyze and decipher films and documents, take part in missions offered by the characters, share the countless clues with your friends, carry out your own research on the web, and even in real life. Emails, text messages, social networks. Follow the investigation at your own pace from your PC or cell phone. If you make it to the top through sheer determination and talent, you could soon join the team of investigators in the story and even play a starring role.
And of course, those who deserve it will be compensated.
When I got started, I thought it was only a game. Little did I know that this story would change my life.
Hey, you got any? Yes. You got the envelope? I have it. Thanks, man. Thank you.
Altminds.
Donc Altman, c'est...
So the real name is Altminds, and then we had a code name. The genuine name of the program is Altminds. www.altminds.com is the official web page. Game is core to the experience. It is rather a game designed for hardcore gamers. The game is surrounded by various satellites that are have the form of a game or not, and that bring the people into the story world of the project, and this in an easy and playful way. So we have various partners for the technology, Orange, and also Orange's cousins and cousins. Each of them have their role to play. This is a very well-defined story world, and we'll see various forms and screens coming out of this universe in order to reach those core gamers, but also those passive viewers who just want to follow the story and watch them on their sofa, viewing their TV screen or their tablet, their pad. So this is a new activity, a new writing, a new development. The very starting point of this is the story that has been written. It was a very complicated story, but the writer, the author, Julien had already written in the year 2003 a very successful piece that was announcing this kind of game world, mixing real and virtual elements. So release is foreseen in October 2012 in 4 languages: French, Spanish, English and German. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for displaying this exclusive announcement to us. We are going to move forward on the debate, but let's stick to the topic. You're exactly a go-between between cross-media and video game, and working together with Lexis Numérique or Eric Vienno, who are game creators and manufacturers, is probably a vital experience to you, what can Transmedia learn from those people and those game creators? Well, it's rather easy. Their main asset is that all those social networks and new usages, new behaviors that we discover, they are already known to the world of game, and this for many years. They are aware of those practices and those social mechanisms in a different way that is less extreme, because it's not only about using a network for the simple purpose of it, but surrounded by a game and guided by the meaning in the story. Those networks are play then a meaningful function with regards to the game, and this is to me the vital point on this. Which kind of technology may add and bring meaning into my project? So this way of thinking is natural to them. Conversely, Julien, do you think we can say that people from the video field have something to teach to those transmedia players? What video gamers can learn from transmedia? This is a complicated assertion. I do not think that it is accurate, because we created the grammar and structure for interactive fictions. We've been dealing with intellectual property rights and IPs for a very long time, and we can build on a rich experience. We've been carrying out many projects. I was discussing with someone from the Ubisoft, talking about Assassin's Creed, which combines comics, a feature movie, and other media. And so I was talking to him about this project and saying that this feature film is conveying the story of the hero's father. So it's really an added content on this story world. And he answered to me that it was only a byproduct and not a genuine cross-media project. So I told him, you have a very high expectations as regards cross-media. And he told me that, yes, that they were trying to develop very powerful models, and we had the opportunity to discuss that on the phone. In a practical way, they implement some attempts with a high potential that were called companion games by Ubisoft. And this means that our hardcore gamers will play in the evening on their console, will play connected games that do not have this viral and contamination effect. So therefore we wanted to come up with a social game that may add up to the experience of Assassin's Creed on Facebook. The gameplay of it is very simple and somehow critical, but the main asset of it is that you register using the game's log, and then the Facebook game recognizes you, knows who you are and your tracks and your records, and all the deeds and all your path in this social game has influence on your gaming via the console.
So when you go home, what you do then after the day can really serve a purpose in this world, because you have experience of the game, which is complementary, which pursue the same objectives. And also, secondly, my friends who don't play that game are really inquisitive, wondering, and are curious. So it's an opportunity there to invite them to join me to play the game, to share that experience with them through the bonuses system and so on. So on usage and grammar, it's pretty obvious. The Arca gamer will go onto Facebook. Well, then are less. His friends will be less hardcore in quotes in their engagement, and it's a great opportunity then to recruit them. So that's the experience that I think is a very, very, very positive one. In addition, Bysoft has invested in a large cinema studio in a suburb of Paris some time back, where major French studios felt they needed to do some more recruitment. So that is then the type of Bysoft development that I think is really going to take off in the cinema world. And the company says it's going to do transmedia, but at the same time, it still has a lot of lessons for us. I'm sure in the coming years after transmedia, the true transmedia now. This is called, this is Screen Legacy, is called companion games. Now there's one topic that we started talking about, video games and transmedia together must interconnect or enter into a type of a friction. So a rub. So everything we've talked about, the user experience, and when I hear about trailers such as Altminds to Avenue and so on, and other programs, the users, I feel, are going to freak out. You don't feel that they're really going to engage or get into the game because they've got to retrieve this or that, go onto Facebook and retrieve their points and so on. Rick, is this friction and the challenges to reduce that friction for then video game operators versus transmedia, is this something that you can foresee and can comment on?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So managing friction is one of the core competencies of the newest generation of video games. Friction is effectively anything that gets in between you and the fun. And that could be that you've got to download something and then install it, and it takes 5 clicks in order to do that. The chances are that 90% of your users will not do that, and you'll lose them, which gives you a tiny addressable market. It could be that your product is loading in Flash, but because of where your servers are located, it takes them 15 seconds to load up. You will lose 75% of your users unless you load very quickly. There are lots of different types of friction, and managing friction is at the heart of what most social games companies do. So I think that friction is the silent killer of many online games, and particularly, I think, of the alternate reality game. And the reason is really simple, is that if you are expecting a user to access on 5 different platforms, each of them having to do something different, install, log in, register, access a particular website, oh, it's not that close, sorry. Access a particular website, find a very obscure bit of complex narrative that's buried somewhere deep in the web. The chances are that the friction, i.e. what gets in the way between the user who wants to find that content and all of the hoops that the ARG designer expects the user to jump through, the chances are that that will kill most of your audience. And what's happened to ARGs in the past is exactly that. So look at Perplexity. Mind Candy raised £10 million in order to build a world-class ARG. And there's no doubt that it did that. Creatively, an incredibly exciting product. Commercially, complete failure. It just it failed to wash its face commercially, i.e. it just didn't make any money. And the reason is because they reached to a niche of a niche of a niche of players, and that group was simply not large enough to sustain the development costs and the ongoing development. So friction is really important thing that will kill an ARG. And I suspect that when you look at a social game versus a hardcore game, you see a completely different version of friction. The hardcore gamer will put up with huge amounts of friction. Why? Well, if I want to play the latest Assassin's Creed game, I will have read the reviews, the previews. I will have gone onto Metacritic. I'll have seen all of the trailers. I will then, when it comes out, I will pre-order it in the store on the high street. I will then walk up the high street, buy the boxed product. I walk all the way home. I plug it into my machine. It takes 20 minutes or whatever to load up, and eventually I get to play. Now, as a hardcore gamer, because I'm so excited about that game, I will put up with that friction. For a casual player, there is, even the first couple of steps in that chain, you will have lost the casual player. This is why the load times are so important. This is why managing friction for a social game is so important. So what a company like Zynga or Wooga or Playfish from Electronic Arts or there are countless companies all do is they use analytics, which is a data package that tells you exactly what your users are doing with your product. And it will tell you down to the click. So it's not just roughly who this user is or how many page views you're looking at. You're looking at the efficacy, the efficiency of every feature of your product, and then you are figuring out if it's not working, how do you fix it? So split testing, A/B testing, multivariate testing, call it what you will. A company like Zynga will trial 10 different versions of its front page live in front of users, and they will see which one works, and then they will optimize it to the one that works best. But it's not just the front page, it will be every aspect of the funnel that you are acquiring users all the way through to playing, and then the next funnel from playing all the way to purchasing, and the next funnel from purchasing to repeat purchase. They optimize everything. So friction is something that they are managing on a daily basis, and the designers, the support teams, the marketers, the commercial guys, the pricing of every single virtual good in the store, all of that is optimized using analytics. And so that friction is at the heart of the success of these companies. And if anyone's in any doubt about how successful these companies are, you can only look at Zynga, which went from $0 turnover to $1 billion in turnover in 3.5 years.
One question is friction. Did friction kill the Second Life?
Well, actually, no. So Second Life is a really interesting case of a niche audience that of creators who are actually quite happy to buy virtual goods. So Second Life got loads of hype, and it's been built up and then destroyed in the media thereafter. But at the heart of it is actually a really nicely profitable business that sells vast amounts of virtual goods to a particular audience. So did it kill it? No, because that audience is willing to put up with that kind of friction. But if you're going, for instance, as most social games are, if you're targeting a 42-year-old female in the Midwest of America, then she has a very, very short attention span, and the vast majority of casual players do too, and you need to be really careful about how you distribute your product if you're trying to reach that audience.
Quite fascinating what you're saying about friction and how Zynga and other companies study that and use analytic. And of course, that's one of the things, I guess, we want to go and say, hey, let's do, when we're doing transmedia, we don't have always the financial means, but let's try to analyze that on our productions and our games. But what you were saying earlier is that every millisecond separating you from the fun is analyzed and optimized.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at casual, massively multiplayer online games, if you're a player and you click MMO into Google and you see an advert saying "Play Now," your expectation when you click Play Now is that you'll be able to play now. If instead you're being asked to register and fill in all this data, and in fact, credit card as well, and so on, again, 90% of you you're not going to play. You're not going to get past that. And so the speed at which the games company can get you to the fun is the most important thing. Registration and commercialization, this happens all down the line. The choice of this timing is really important. So friction, these are mechanisms, these are tools of the trade of online games companies that can absolutely be put into practice in transmedia. I mean, I'd argue if they're not, then you're missing something. I guess the other part of social games is the virality factor. So everyone talks about virality, and the word that immediately springs to mind is sharing. Yes, it's sharing, but what social games companies do is they build recruitment of friends into the design. So you can't progress in the game unless you either buy a virtual good, and that opens up new content, or if you recruit friends to play alongside. And that you'll only do that recruitment to your friends, which is a valuable asset of yours, if actually that recruitment is not going to damage your reputation in your own social graph. And so social games companies have understood that they need to offer things of value to those who are recruiting on their behalf in order to succeed. So that virality, and again, of course, there's all the metrics, all the analytics underneath virality. It's called the K factor, which measures how many new users each new user that you recruit will go out and recruit on your behalf. So analytics, again, underpins the principles of social games design.
One interesting thing you told me earlier was that actually recommending a game to a friend is reducing the friction. How come?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm completely paraphrasing one of the leading lights of the social games industry who has been talking about this for years, Christian Segerstrahler from Playfish. But he points out the fundamental difference between walking into a retail store and looking at some shelves in which someone else has chosen the products for you, and that you then have to decide which one you're going to pick. And that's a classic retail experience. We experience it every day in the supermarket. You experience it when you go into a digital store like iTunes. You experience it all over the place. What social recommendation does is that it throws out 99% of those products, and instead you're recommended a single product or to do a single action by someone you trust. And that trust and finding out ways to encourage that kind of recruitment is very powerful, a very powerful way of acquiring new users. It's also, if the viral channels work, much cheaper. So this is another of these hidden success factors. Facebook does this incredibly well because they have so many different viral channels that allow me to recommend things to my friends. Whereas MySpace had terrible viral channels, terrible notifications, almost no data, and YouTube is trying to raise its game to give a little bit more data, but it is just a generation behind what Facebook provides. So these are some of the hidden factors behind the success of Facebook and Facebook games companies.
Before we go and move on to the final part of this panel discussion and hand over to the floor perhaps, I'd like to ask Morgan, then we've not talked about interfaces much, but could there be friction in outmines, for example, or would this basically naturally transpire? I'd like to pick up on this discussion, the key term here, and this is what we're looking for, is an encounter between the algorithm, the code, and the storyboard, and that's important that we understand that we are. We have a host of algorithms now so that our storyboard will get across and that we will control. But the more we control the algorithms and the code, the more able we will be to then convey and get the story across. So the storyboard then that will be the most social and most shared. So it's about controlling the tools and the code. I was at Story Awards then recently in San Francisco this year, where Hollywood people invaded the Valley, which is a strong sign, if ever there was one, of people who develop and engage then and raise those issues. But the bottom line then there in San Francisco was that the two merged, but the storyboard was the master, was the central piece there on the chessboard. And to pick up your point, there is that friction. We hope there will be, and we will do everything we can. Frictionless, not friction. I hope that sharing will be very much at the heart of that experience, and that the world that we are now going to chart and draw will be then heard and acted upon by the community of users based on that storyline. So we've done everything we can to make sure that that story can take off, then transpire, then be experienced and be related to. Then and the different parts of that story needs to, as it were, live its own life, so to speak. I'd like to react to then Morgan on collecting data and the other peripherals. What this suggests to me, it's the way we produce a video game. A video game is an iterative type of production project where this is about prototyping. When we talk about this with games designers, we don't know whether it's going to be a good game before we've produced it, and that's a major difference then in our way of working. And that's something that we need to bear in mind. And that's, I think, where the future lies. If we want to then do frictionless transmedia, we need to test the system, the mechanism, the social networks, the technology. Are we using one video on YouTube, then going on to another side and sharing that experience? Unless we've set it up, tested it, beta tested it, we don't know whether it's going to really work and be successful. And the prototyping here is very much part of that equation. We, in our audiovisual production and video, we call this pre-production, pre-prod, which will lead to prod. And that's why that in the game document, everyone gets involved and will give his or her feedback, because the developers the games designers will give us the feedback on what works, what will not work, or what is likely to work, or what is likely not to work. So that's the point, my point. On web, there are experienced designer experience, there are interaction design businesses, and sometimes we confuse the issue or fudge the issue, because the interaction designer then job is about developing interfaces between content and the audience, and the experience designer's job is to oversee all those interactions then within the system, the technology, and unless we've tested it by collecting data, then unless we have the evidence, we don't know whether this is going to work or not. Finally, we have I3. We had I3 last week. I beg your pardon. Then the console games major event, the AAA event now. What should we remember then and go home with in terms of learnings? Then the producers, what should they learn from E3? Sorry. Then, as I said earlier, maybe this is we need to understand the video game industry then and transmedia. This year, the major innovations have been entertainments on two screen entertainment, referring to then this social TV. Then video game manufacturers have absorbed that, understood that, and have offered then solutions. Microsoft has offered Smart Glass, which is an application available on Androids and on other platforms that such as then TV-friendly then tablets. So and screens with an iBox. It could be music, it could be movies. The strength of that system is that there's a framework and lots of tools within it made available to the user, to the video games manufacturers to offer gameplay on a second screen on the tablet. Wii U was then developed, which is a tablet which interacts very easily in a very user-friendly way. I haven't tested it personally, but I've seen a demo in a frictionless way. The second tablet is totally integrated into the game, a bit like Nintendo DS, which offers two screens. In the DS, that's a top screen, which is the display, top display. And then on the lower screen, you see that you can handle, just like a tactile screen. So Nintendo offered then and presented 23 games, and out of the 23 there were some great experiences that were very enriching and edifying. Now, it could raise questions for developers, of course, as to how they might develop that, and it will raise questions. But as the hardware is now ready to roll, and as it's communicating with the two screens, then this is, I think, very user-friendly.
Rick, you want?
I've got a very different view, actually. So my view is, so E3 is one of the oldest games trade conferences in my industry, and it is dominated by console manufacturers and traditional publishers. And in my view, it's getting pretty irrelevant, actually. They represent a shrinking share of the total market. There's more money spent on online games and mobile games than on consoles globally. We reached that tipping point last year, where in the down part of the cycle for consoles, and the console manufacturers are desperately trying to find ways to invent new technology to extend the life of their platforms, the existing old platforms that have been around for 3, 4, 5 years, depending on which company you look at. And why are they trying to do that? Because they simply can't afford yet to invest in the next generation. So I think the other reason it's not relevant in this context, in my view, is that look at your average budget for developing a console title. It's in the millions of dollars, and if you look at the kind of production values that are similar between television and games, the most polished games with the best narratives and look and feel that are akin to highest quality TV or film have budgets that are well over $20 million. There are very few examples of transmedia where that budget, or even a fraction of that budget, will be under discussion. You have to have some new funders come into the transmedia market to be able to put money into this. However, there are a couple of examples. And probably the biggest budget that we know of is a joint production between Sci-Fi Networks, the cable channel in the States, and a massively multiplayer online game company called Trion Worlds. And they've been producing for the last 4 years a game called Defiance. Which is being developed in parallel between an MMOG, a fully loaded, thousands of players in the same universe, persistent world, and at the same time there is a TV drama that will be influenced by what happens in the game. Now, the budgets that are being put into the game side of this are good enough to produce quality product, and we expect, no one knows the budgets because Trion haven't yet revealed it, but they have raised, they're one of the most successful fundraisers in the games industry. They've raised over $185 million, suspiciously large amounts of money, and we'll have to see what happens when that launches across Europe and North America next year. But examples of transmedia products or games with TV angles of that scale are incredibly few, and I would caution you getting too excited about the very latest bit of Nintendo or Microsoft hardware that will go out to a fraction of their installed base for their particular console.
Petite précision, pour moi, en quoi c'est intéressant justement les sorties de...
Why, in my view, Nintendo's products are interesting because they develop a gameplay. This is what we try to develop with TV and streaming applications and mobile applications. Studios are thinking about it too. And I do not recommend you to invest in the Nintendo platform. But what I mean is that they have very interesting ideas and interesting to observe them in order to understand how you can generate very rich interactions between applications and TV.
Back on that, sorry, just we've been having a really nice interplay, so we'll carry on the debate. Nintendo is the slowest games company to get online. They don't understand it. They don't have technology that exploits it. They don't use the latest commercial models that is responsible for generating most of the revenue in the online space. They won't use microtransactions. They won't use freemium because it's a fundamental threat to their product mentality as opposed to the service mentality that drives most large online games companies. So if you want to look, for me, I would be looking at European companies like BigPoint or Gameforge or in France and Karma for examples of how you would use the online space and be inspired by what they're doing with their large virtual communities over blue sky thinking from a fundamentally last generation company, which is Nintendo. I mean, albeit profitable until a year or so ago, beyond any other company in the industry, but they are in serious decline, and most in the industry think that they've got a mountain to climb in order to win back market share.
Le projet dont...
So the project mentioned by Rick is called Defiance on Sci-Fighter channel, and it is led by a company called Trial World. This is it. Interestingly enough, you're telling us that while developing their own system and their own business system, those games are going to meet the needs of TV and social TV. So they bring in new answers to those issues. Another point I'd like to make in a kind of a provocative tone, if you look at the history of video game, it's been 50 years. We are now watching the 8th console generation. We had 2 major crashes in this industry. Will that still take 50 more years until we get some mature boxes and TVs and consoles?
Sorry, I was waiting for the translation. The answer is no, and my belief is based on the history itself. So it took the console manufacturers or the console part of the industry 20, 25 years to break out of the silo of young male players and reach into the family and go beyond to older female players and hit the mass market. It took the social games industry 6 months. And the reason that it took 6 months is because 10 years before that, you had a generation of older female players who were downloading games and playing very casual, simple play games, sometimes based around narrative, and they were downloading them from sites like Big Fish. And so they were being broken in, if I can use that expression, as you might break in a horse to understand how to be ridden. These players are learning how to play gameplay, how to play games. They're learning the grammar and the vocabulary of games. And then what social gaming did was that they added the social graph to the same kind of gameplay, and they added in the optimization and constant production, continuous production, in order to make games better and better. So I think those barriers for adoption have come down. And so if you look at most Western countries, it's about 75% of us play. Now, if you ask people if they're gamers, then you'll tend to find it's actually about 30%. And that's because most mainstream people, particularly women, hate being called a gamer. But if you ask them what they're playing, are they playing on their phones, or are they playing on social networks? Are they playing even offline, the solitaire on their PC? The vast majority of us play, and including over 50s. And what that means is that the grammar and language of games is known by most of us. So for us, the most interesting part and the bit that we are talking to our clients about the most and that they're most interested in is not the games part, it's actually gamification. So what gamification does is that it takes elements of games without building entire games and uses them to improve their other media products. And you can see examples of gamification spreading all the way from how fuel efficiently you drive your car. There are dashboards on cars where the leaves start to grow if you're using less miles per gallon in your car. All the way through to creating ideas in government departments. The Department of Work and Pensions in the UK has saved £21 million by introducing a virtual stock exchange for ideas where their employees will vote using a virtual currency to find out which are the best ideas that most people think will improve the department, and this resulted in huge amounts of efficiencies. And my favorite example of gamification is around TV, which is something called Club Psych in the States, where between one series and the next, a company added leaderboards and prizes and virtual goods and community features and, yes, points and badges to incentivize people to use and vote around the content. And they saw a 40% increase in their linear viewership in the target market of the 18 to 35-year-olds. Very few interactive agencies can claim that kind of success rate in driving linear viewership. So, and none of these are full games. They are taking elements of games design, elements of games marketing, elements of games community and production, and bringing them into other media. And I think that my view of all of the pitches that we've heard over the last couple of days is that we're looking largely at gamification rather than games.
Okay. Merci Eric. On fera un autre panel complet sur la game.
Thank you very much. We'll have a full roundtable panel fully dedicated to gamification in the days to come. Do we have some questions? Good morning, Arnaud Druel from Cap Digital. Listening to your panel, I had the feeling that various communities, on the one hand from video game and on the other hand from transmedia and AV, need a point of convergence because one of them can learn a lot from the other one. Do you see such a convergence? I still have the feeling that these are two very separate and distinct communities, group living in separate spaces. How is it in your view? Do you think that people from the video game world will say that they've been working together for a long time and keep on their own track? Do you think both groups are talking to each other? And let's say I am tomorrow a project producer for a transmedia project. Is that going to be easy for me to gather all the necessary skills and competences? I guess the necessary skills for a transmedia project are different to the one for a traditional project. Well, I need to find some designers, some algorithm workers. So I will sum it up. Do video game and transmedia communities talk to each other? We still have a long way to go. We can already see the premises of it in the United States. The League did validate the terminology of a transmedia producer. So this is going to be a link between AV and other worlds. So there is a genuine trend. We see that some studios also open up to those systems and ways of working. Of course, we see that it's rather the world of video game that's opening up their doors to transmedia. They have different issues. Video game have a long time experience, and now today, AV production, be it for TV or cinema, movie, do not need such rich experience for a start. A simple, mere mobile TV screen experience may be sufficient in order to move from one screen to the other, and they do not necessarily need to rely on a 300 pages specification.
I mean, I would say, listening to the different companies that have been talking over the last couple of days, maybe 1 in 4 has been mentioning games. So those conversations are already starting, and I think that something else will come in, which is a bit more Darwinian, and that is that I think transmedia, what I've seen, transmedia lacks a commercial model for the end user. If that is simply unlocking premium content, then well, good luck. If it's going to be looking at the games industry, which has been pioneering all of these new commercial models around freemium, around microtransactions, virtual goods, virtual economies, at that point you start to see some really interesting crossover. And I suspect that transmedia is going to be forced to look for commercial models that make these products commercially viable rather than marketing tools or user engagement tools. I think that will happen naturally.
Est-ce que je te leur donne jusque est-ce qu'à un moment
maybe we will say one day I'm producing transmedia, as we could say I'm producing entertainment. Transmedia is a field encompassing video game, video production, directing. So maybe we can say that a TV program needs anyway to expand on numerous screens and platforms telling the same story or different stories. The same applies to video games. I also have an plea. And I think this shift is going to happen in a natural way. I think there is a need for that, and there is a phenomenon too in the United States. Several universities are reflecting upon this. This shift is going to happen in a natural way because a consumer will think of multitasking and multi-screen usages. Commenting on that, I'd like to add that we see with augmented reality game, there are marketing tools, but as the studio started working on them, then they opened dedicated studios, or we had the Valve studio who's been producing their own augmented reality games. They know how to produce stories. How can we put the teams together? In the field of video games, we've seen several training programs, and there are lots of graduates who are currently job hunting, and they are now getting to know transmedia. They have the necessary abilities in order to generate and create transmedia projects in a very easy way. So we know that sometimes video game students end up working in communication agencies. So we think that there will be many bridges and cross. So several training opportunities exist, mixing game and fiction too. I'm looking for a person who would testify as an author who's been asking himself whether or not he or she would work together with a game designer. Could someone tell us about such an experience within 2 or 3 minutes? This is a very successful question. They are probably all on the market right now. This was my proposal. I thought it might be interesting to get such a point of view. Was that your case, Julien? Yes. And do you see yourself as a game designer or as an author? I'm an experienced designer, which means that I'm working on both fields, and this means that the author, when working the writer, when working on playful dimensions of the project, they have many proposals and many ideas, and then the other partner in the project may give the guidelines and say, okay, let's decide upon the characters. So this is the first communication issue that may occur when they work together. Or is that just a different way of writing scripts and getting the designer to understand the script? Well, in this way we generate a different story world, but we work in a different way. If I may insist on that, a fiction writer or a documentary script writer needs to ask himself what the characters' abilities have to be and their characteristic in order to then be in a position to work on games. Yes, that's the case. So this is a new way of writing and of designing the story.
When we work with our big media clients, what we tend to find a lot is that there are different principles at work between the games guys and the TV guys, and in fact, it's also true that that same difference in principle works between the old games guys and the new games guys. So the old games guys are writing games design documents that are largely delivered. And that with some testing, maybe at 1 point or 2 points during development, the end result is largely written in advance. Whereas the minimum viable product methodology, where you build the smallest thing and then get it live and then you test it and then it changes based on what your users are doing with it, it militates against the old school games designer. It also militates particularly against writers from traditional media who are expecting to write everything in advance and set out a single linear narrative or even a multi-linear narrative, and they're not expecting the users to fundamentally change that direction. And even when you lay this out and you show how it should work or how it could work and how it could make the product much better as it's being developed and iterated, there's still a disconnect there. So I don't want to pretend that there aren't some serious challenges in the way that this new way of working meets the old ways of working, either from old gaming or from old media.
Ouais, c'est vrai que c'est
Yes. Very often, writers feel that there has been a betrayal and that people are cheating on their work because they let the user take control over the narrative in the video game. So this is the first generation of game in which the user has the control over the story. And the writers want themselves to be the one who decides upon the moves of the camera and the ending of the plot. So it is very difficult to imagine several paths and to let the user make the final choice. Good afternoon, Pascal Slikos. I'm the author of a cross-media project. My question is about the budget. My project is not a cross-media game project. It's rather about a series that's based on a game. But if I got it right, you need a massive budget for a good quality game, and cross-media projects do not gather important amounts of money.
So the question is really, is this something you would advise that as a transmedia concept or not in video games? I'd like to maybe clarify this point slightly. The idea is, and we're talking about drawing a parallel between video games and transmedia. There's no, we're not saying that transmedia might cost so many 100,000 then euros, or transmedia then might cost so much then 100,000. We've barely talked about less expensive social games, nor have we talked about gamification in the game process much. But to pick up the point before I hand over back to the panel, the contribution of games to transmedia programs today remains still really pretty straightforward. I'm not man out minds, which they're simple and straightforward and affordable price-wise. So I wouldn't then discourage it. I wouldn't advise against it.
Talking about big budget productions for console or massively multiplayer online games, and that wouldn't be my recommendation to anybody doing a transmedia project. It's far too expensive. But you can make a perfectly decent quality mobile game for 20 or 30,000 euros if you have a good designer. The technology is, you can sort that out. It really comes down to design. And so what I've been really encouraged to hear in some of the pitches we've been hearing over the last couple of days is to see the collaboration between games designers who understand not just gameplay mechanics, but user motivation, and other types of media producers. So my advice to you in your situation is find yourself a good games designer, sit down with her or him and figure out what it is you want to achieve. And you won't have to necessarily create a game at all. You could add playful design. And that's what gamification is, not points and badges, playful design.
Je vais être un petit peu extrême et un peu direct.
If I can ask you a direct question, I don't think we've got much choice in the matter, have we? Then, have we got much choice? Then if in the future the answer behind that is it's about an engagement, commitment. The younger people have one eye on the screen, one eye on something else. They're multitasking visually and cerebrally as well. So this is about engagement in the games. I see this at TB Czech and Social TV Orange colleagues. It's a game. It's a game. And we don't have much choice in the matter. That's not an adverse comment I'm making. I'm saying simply we've got lots to discover still. Yes, comment. Then the split in the budget, the breakdown in a transmedia project could have maybe 6x52 series. Maybe that's a mid-long-term project. Maybe we should be a bit more reasonable. We are then allocating a lot of money and marking a lot of money there on projects that maybe we should slim down a bit. I mean, if you want to do a transmedia, then a project that could be one, and if you want only to earmark or allocate 1/20th of the budget, this may not be feasible at all. So it has to reflect. I think we need quite a hefty budget here, actually. That's the end of this panel discussion. Thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you. Dear friends, I know we've got questions. Feel free to talk to the panel. We need to move on. And I suggest a coffee break. And in half an hour, we'll be back for brain content. Those of you who want to work with brands, we've got agencies, we've got producers, and who are looking for authors, creators. So please attend that then discussion later on.